Originally, the pilot was called Nightside. It was about two cops who only worked at night. Starsky and Hutch, that were the characters' names. The script was written, it got pretty good notices, and then someone ran a budget on it and said, we can't afford to shoot this. We can't afford to shoot only at night. At which point, it tanked, it went away. I was at that time under contract to Spelling Goldberg. That ran out, I went to Warner Brothers. 2 years passed, somebody at ABC called Warner Brothers and said, can Bill Blinn write such and such? And whoever it was at Warner Brothers, and I don't know who, gave the guy at ABC some attitude about, no, you can't have Blinn because we got Blinn, whatever, wherever it was. And it ticked the guy at ABC off. He called Aaron and Len and said, can you take that old Nightside script and cut it down to 90 minutes and just blow off the night aspect of it? Aaron called me, I reread it, and I said, yeah, that can be done. That's pretty easy, actually. We did it, changed the title to Starsky and Hutch, and there we are. So some nameless executive at Warner Brothers who pissed off another nameless executive at ABC is largely responsible for this.
I had known Bill since he was at Screen Gems when I ran Screen Gems. He was a young writer there, but I thought he was an inordinately gifted and a terrifically nice guy. So when we talked about doing this show, we talked to Bill about it. And he came in with Starsky and Hutch.
He's the whole reason it happened. I mean, he's, in my opinion, one of the best writers, one of the best talents in our industry at that time and even today. I think his title, Starsky and Hutch alone, was genius.
We said to him, Starsky and Hutch, where did you get these names from? And he said, it's S&H. Those are the real names of the guys who created the green stamps. Now, I never knew whether he was kidding or telling the truth, but I thought that was such a good story, we would just go with it.
They've got integrity, Starsky.
Yeah, it's nice to know we're looking for a class act.
I had always thought that television prefers creating its own stars. That in a sense, if they see someone playing Starsky, he's Starsky to them, and they believe he's real.
And if you look at the shows they were doing, Mod Squad, none of the people in Mod Squad were well known, none of the people on The Rookies were well known. The whole bunch of shows they were doing, they created young stars.
As opposed to taking a movie star and fitting him into a role. At any rate, we tried to do that all the way along the line.
Aaron and Leonard and I cast the show. And it was a process that took, you know, a long, long time because the chemistry, of course, had to be important. When we first saw David Soul, we were terribly impressed. We had seen the movie that he was in and felt very fortunate to get him. That wasn't singularly why we used him, because the chemistry was going to be important.
As I remember, there was a request made from Aaron Spelling, and they had a new series called Starsky and Hutch, and he had apparently seen a film I'd done called Magnum Force with Clint Eastwood, and offered me the role of Hutch. And I read the script, and there was these two wonderful characters. Well, one wonderful character, and his name was Starsky. The other guy's bland, he's kind of white bread, boring. So, yeah, I'd like to do it, but I'll do Starsky. And very quickly thereafter, I got a call back saying, no, you'll play Hutch.
I was probably not a fan of the concept of David Soul as Hutch at first. I said, not edgy enough, not enough anger, and there's something in there is just not gonna. Well, I didn't know David as well as I thought I knew David, or David had changed. Because when he came in, like Paul, he's bright, but there is about David a kind of a Scandinavian sense of removal, stepping back a little bit, which, when you couple it with Paul, whose instinct is to get right in your face and to be very passionate about it, you've got a kind of nice teeter-totter between those two guys.
The relationships that developed on camera, I think, was the main attraction. The heart that they had made it special. Here were two guys, one dark-haired guy, one blonde guy, and this black guy, and all of them had some kind of reason to be together. you know, to try, not just about solving the crime, but there was something else, that the humanity of and the caring between all of us, and particularly those two guys, that was a great attraction.
We had this amazing ability to be able to not be looking at each other and know what the other one was doing. You know, the first year I kind of pulled out all the stops and played every trick I could play in terms of, you know, getting things. David would be kind of like, who's this puppy dog running around here? What's going on? And we found a really interesting dance between the two of us, and a sense of fun.
In any kind of a television series situation, you have to leave room for the growth. Particularly in series, you're developing a relationship with an audience. It goes over a period of time. And so obviously your character is going to grow. And I think to a large degree, producers and even the writers, you know, count on the regular people in the show to bring something of themselves to this thing. So there's, in that sense, it's wide open.
You deal, baby, in about 10 seconds. Well, you got no deal. None at all.
Along came this movie of the week, backdoor pilot, called Starsky and Hutch. And I read it and I thought, well, this will never make it to a series, and I need film on myself, so I'll go in. So on the particular day, I went, I had, in my house, I had this big copper bowl full of walnuts. So on my way out the door, I grabbed a few because I hadn't eaten. And I got down to Fox, and the place was full up. And so I sat on the floor, and I fell asleep. And when I was awakened, everyone was gone. And they said, are you here to read? I said, yeah. So I said, well, there's nobody else to read with you, but come in anyway. So I walked in, and I reached my pocket, and I took 2 walnuts, and I cracked them, and I thought, okay, and I started eating them. And they said, well, you want to read? I said, sure. So I read like a page and a half. They said, stop right there. And then the next day, they called me in to read with David.
We were about to shoot. I think we were a week away from shooting, and we had cast David Soul as Hutch. We didn't have a Starsky. And then we brought in Paul Michael Glaser, and I remember putting them in the room in Aaron's office, and Aaron and I walked out of the room, but we watched from the doorway. And we watched the two of them interacting, and we watched their relationship. And I don't know, I guess we got really lucky. We just said, it works.
Paul and I had such a good relationship right from the beginning. We looked for places to make it grow. Starsky and Hutch initially was, you know, 2 streetwise, hard-hitting cops, bachelor cops. And they were looking to make it sort of macho, chase the beautiful ladies around and chase the bad guys and get the girls and so forth. Well, that wears thin pretty quick.
These shoes you bought me. Yeah? They're killing my instep. Instep. Instep.
When we first saw Paul, all of us were smitten by him because he had something extra special. We had seen many actors, and many of them were very good, but he had something extra. I guess he looked like a man who might be called Starsky, and he was very masculine and an extremely good actor.
What Paul brought to the table was intelligence. I mean, if you see his performances and if you know the human being at all, he's got an incredibly bright, burning intelligence that he couples with humor. That's a hard combo played.
When Starsky and Hutch came along, Starsky, for me, kind of was an amalgamation of a lot of elements that I'd worked on in his persona: the vulnerability and gullibility of the boy, and the responsibilities and passions of the man, and mixing the two so that you had an opportunity to play with comedy, to set yourself up. So there was a certain degree of an endearing quality that, you know, I was able to explore there.
What Paul and I decided early on is we were going to make these two guys men first and cops second, as opposed to the other way around. Television series before then, to a large degree, had been just give me the facts, man, you know, and let's bust the bad guy. And we had an opportunity here, because of our relationship, to develop some extraordinary human sort of circumstances within which we then did our jobs as cops.
Whatever it took, you know, whether it was the handsome, laid-back, waspy David Soul and the more energetic, intense Jewish Paul Michael Glaser, You thought for a second, a few years before that, we had seen Redford and Dustin Hoffman and All the President's Men, and maybe it could work. They sure were good in the room together.
They had this, a very unique quality that maybe they weren't like that in real life, but on stage, the quality they had was great intensity for what they were doing. They wanted to be the best cops in the world, and they were very good friends, very caring about each other.
They were very emotional with each other. They touched each other. There were a lot of articles written that maybe they were gay. Maybe they really loved each other more than just two guys loving each other. That wasn't true, because they were very healthy guys. Now, that's very, very unusual for police drama, particularly in those days.
A lot of it grows out of the process, you know, in terms of what David and I may bring to something and what that sparks an idea in the producer's head or in the writer's heads, and then they start writing towards that, and then we look at a situation and we say, you know, the reality of the situation is Paul, would feel this way, and David said I'd feel this way, and before we know it, we've got ourselves an emotional scene.
Both guys, both characters, were, in essence, people who loved their job and hated the system. Didn't like the rules, didn't like the paperwork, and also had a sense of the absurd in the world in which they moved.
They brought this great affection for each other. I think that's what really did it. It was, it made people in the audience say, I'd like to have friends like that.
Detective Hutchinson.
Man, that's formal. This is the proprietor, Huggy Bear, calling.
I was going through Santa Barbara or Ojai or in that area, and I came across a disc jockey whose name was Huggy Bear. Now, I don't know if he was a bootleg jockey, some kid out of a garage, or if he was a real guy working out of a station. To this day, I don't know. I do know when I heard the name Huggy Bear, somehow that presented you with a character.
Well, I was a hungry actor from New York, and it really started with some coincidences. I was cast in a film called Across 110th Street, but the director was Barry Shear, and Barry Shear ended up being the director of the pilot for Starsky and Hutch.
We were looking to find a very unique character to play Huggy Bear. I think he had 1 or 2 scenes in the pilot, and when we tested the pilot with the audience, he tested as high as Starsky and Hutch. He just, again, clicked because he was such an unusual guy.
I wanted somebody, not necessarily for the pilot, but I thought if this pilot sold, they needed someone who worked on the dark side, who crossed back and forth across that line with ease. It was also without conscience to a large degree.
Again, we got some flack because, well, what is he? He's a pimp? Well, sort of. Well, but a good guy. Is he gay? They didn't say gay in those days. Not really gay, kind of androgynous. Androgynous, what does that mean? I said kind of androgynous.
Huggy worked to play both sides of the coin. He was shady on one side and, you know, and a friend on the other, or he dealt on both sides. And he was a guy whose relationship we protected.
I think I developed the character and the fact that there was a demand for, from the audience's point of view, because I was part of a formula. I don't think it was intended. You know, he was an aside kind of character, but I was always a role player and a team player, and it became a team. You know, so it was Starsky and Hutch and Huggy Bear.
This is Huggy Bear. Well, what can Huggy Bear be? Can he be threatening? No, he can't be threatening. Not the name of Huggy Bear. Can he be tough? Yeah, oddly enough, he can. Is he standard issue anything? No, not with the name of Huggy Bear, he ain't. And somehow that flushed it out. And then Antonio, he just went into that part with both feet and all his heart. I mean, he loved what he was given to do, and he did it with great style.
My stuff was usually more lighthearted and either in the tag of the show or at some point, but I think Huggy Bear brought another sense of comic relief, humanity, a little bit of the dark side. You didn't know whether or not this guy was good or bad, and so it had an appeal. I didn't even know how much appeal I had until the day after the show ended and I started traveling around the world and seeing how much people were into Huggy Bear.
I think that's part of what made him interesting to people. You weren't exactly sure what he was or how he was, and Antonio was great.
He was always supportive, always there, you know, and very heartfelt. And it's interesting to me that over the years, so many people have come up to me and said how much they loved his character.
I was there, you know, with bells on, and very happy to, you know, to play the role of Huggy Bear and bring it to life, and to bring some humanity and truth to the character.
Hi, Hub.
How many times do we got to tell you? I'm Starchy, he's Hup.
Well, the sun was kind of in my eyes, and you guys look an awful lot alike.
Yeah.
When the pilot was shot, I think about halfway through the shooting, someone said, these guys are very likable. These characters are very likable. Maybe it's not just a movie. Let's put that on the back burner and bear in mind that that's a potential. Largely that was because Paul, Michael, and David, for whatever reason, who knows what that chemistry is, they clicked. They had a tempo, they had a rhythm, they had a give and take that two different actors would not have had.
They just were these new kinds of detectives. They were cool, they were hip. I don't even know if those words were used back then, but that's what they were.
I think the distinct personalities of each one had a sort of a magnet effect. You know, you couldn't have the polarity unless you had the plus and the minus. And I don't know if I was somewhere in between. I think I ping-ponged between the two of them because, you know, and even in some of the scenes, I would always be caught between these two guys, you know, either the good guy, bad cop syndrome, or, you know, the easygoing guy and the tough guy. And David and Paul, they cared so much about the show, which transcended onto the screen.
At this time, in terms of television, there was a lot of Dragnet, there was a lot of Racket Squad, there was a lot of serious, straightforward, by-the-numbers cops whom we could always count on, who never made mistakes and who pretty much went by the book. Once we made the discovery that most cops aren't like that, most human beings aren't like that, and we were able to have fun within the channel of a cop show, that gave the show its own imprint.
David and I had our most fun, I think, when we'd goof on it, you know. I'd have to fight a big guy, and I go, well, how am I going to fight this big guy? So I figure out some way to step on his toe or do something silly. We'd have these undercover routines, and so we'd goof on those. You know, we had the tags of the show, which was always our favorites because we'd get to, you know, kind of cut loose.
Innovation and exploration and all of these things that make what you do fun, you have to earn those. You have to earn the right to do it. You don't start out by improvising this stuff. It's planned. You have 6 or 7 days to shoot. You have this many pages to finish in a day. But if you can do that, and you can bring a value to that, it now allows you the freedom. And the more success the show had, based on the various formulas that we had to accomplish, the more freedom we got.
The head of business affairs for ABC, not an unsophisticated man, and certainly knowledgeable about television, called us after he saw the pilot, and he said, I'd like to hang out with those guys. And I said, well, you know, George, they're real people, and they're really not Starsky and Hutch. He said, yeah, but they're so cool, I want to hang out with them. And when you can connect that way to the audience, you got it made.
This was an easy sell. It was my first pilot, and people had told me what a miracle it was. But it wasn't with Aaron Spelling. I mean, they loved him. Why wouldn't they?
They were eager to do more shows with us, but we still had to come up with a very good script, which I think Bill came up with. And then Mike Eisner, who was then the head of primetime programming at ABC, said, well, how am I going to sell this? You have to create the ad. So we sat down with Bill Blinn and said, how are we going to sell it? And he said, someone in the district is gunning for Starsky and Hutch. Some crimes are more equal than others. So we told that to Michael, and he went, okay, now I know how to sell it.
Man, this heap is a piece of garbage. When are you gonna fix it? Listen to that squeak. It cuts through my brain. I don't hear it. It's driving me nuts, and you don't hear it?
Aaron Spelling put his arm around my shoulders, walked us out of his offices into the parking lot, and said, I have a surprise for you. And he showed us this red Torino with this white stripe down the side. I turned to David, and I said, it looks like a striped tomato.
The idea for the car came from the fact that years ago I had had a green and white Camaro convertible that I was passionately in love with. I traded it in, was driving something else. Starsky and Hutch came along, And I thought, this is my chance to track down another green and white Camaro. So that's what I wrote in the script, and that's what was given to the transportation coordinator. This guy drives a green and white Camaro convertible. Except their transportation deal was not with Chevrolet, made Camaro. Their transportation deal was with Ford. Well, my heart broke. I just, there was no way that we were going to be able to make this show without the green and white Camaro until the guy showed up with the red and white Torino. Big, wonderful white slash on the side. But, you know what, that is kind of hot. That is kind of cool.
The car was a big surprise. Our transportation guys, what they did was they took a Ford Torino, gave it a special paint job, the red and white paint job, and oversized wheels. And it made it seem, when we did our chases, as if this thing was the hottest thing on wheels. The truth was, it wasn't. It was the same Ford motor. It could hardly get up a very steep hill.
I loved the look of it, and it was laughable because undercover cops don't use cars that are that outstanding, as you know.
The bad guys in the second floor office looking out the window. Here they come. Here comes Starsky and Hutch in that red car. Talk about undercover detectives. You betcha. That really fits, doesn't it? The red car was a character, and it really became an icon of the show.
In the show, everybody wanted to know, was it a stick shift? Was it, what kind of engine it had in it? And of course, when I travel around the country after the show, and even in Europe, I hear all the stories about people who painted their Pinto, they painted their Mini Cooper, they painted everything they could, young people, to have a piece of that.
It was impossible to drive. It was heavy, it was cumbersome. It was Starsky's car, not Hutch's car, and every time we took a corner, he'd end up in my lap, and I vowed to destroy that car. I was keen on that objective. Whenever there was an opportunity to hit something, I'd try to hit it.
I think in the pilot, there were two different cars. Paul Michael had the Torino, and Hutch had this old clunker. And at one point, he said, why do I get the ugly car? I think I should ride in the Torino with Starsky all the time. But I think Starsky always drove. It provided a way for Hutch to do the detecting. I would have them, as they're driving down a hill, especially one of my favorites was, and Hutch is saying, well, we talked to Huggy, and the bad was going here, but he should have been here, and somebody's missing from over here, and Starsky's saying, Hutch, don't bother me. I think I've got the handle on what this is doing. Hutch, I need it, Hutch. And Hutch said, what is it? And he said, we don't have any brakes.
Starsky, we're picking up speed. You gotta be a detective. Hit the brake. What the hell are you trying to do?
And so I was able to get all this boring dialogue out of the way with them careening down a hill. And it was fun, and it played into their characters.
The show was on for about a month or so, and we got a call from the Ford Motor Company, who supplied all our cars for all our shows. And they said, guys are coming into the Ford dealerships, and they want to buy the Starsky and Hutch car. What the hell is the Starsky and Hutch car? And so we told them what we had done. So they made a special edition with the paint job. It was a Ford Torino.
Why that car became such a trademark for the show, I truly don't know. There's some things, why did this happen? Why is this person so terribly effective? The same thing is true, I don't know. Who knows? If we'd had the green and white Camaro, it might not have worked. I have no idea. But I know it's, I mean, there are people, there are websites, that are involved with red and white Torinos of that era. And it's just got an impact. I can remember the Variety review, and this is not a word-for-word quote, but I know it started out with, this might just be the perfect ABC pilot to attractive young men with senses of humor and a large injection of action and good-looking people. Yeah, I think they knew what they had on film very, very swiftly.
It just had all of these elements going. And I think that energy was pretty valuable to the audience. David and I would have moments where we really felt like we could connect as actors and as men. And that was very fulfilling.
I'd say that the success of Starsky and Hutch came because it was really about friendship. That is what provided the lasting quality for that show. All of the vicissitudes of friendship, I think, really is what this show was about, and I think one of the reasons why we why it's maintained its popularity for so many years.
I think the most proud I am is just being a part of something that that's special, because memory is really, really important, and nobody knows, you know, what the look between David and Paul or myself when we say we know because we were there.
We knew when we were watching dailies that it just worked. The relationship worked. You never know if you're doing a two-hander. The key to that is it going to happen between the two of them? The stories is 1,000 stories. They're all the same stories you've seen on every cop show, but you have to do them with a different twist. But did it work between Paul and David? And it worked.
The toughest thing for me in making this show was in not screwing it up, because it was a pretty good concept. The story of the pilot went together well. It was nicely cast, in particular with the leads, and there was that sense, I guess, if a football player intercepts a pass and is running for the goal line, around the time he gets to the 20, he starts thinking, don't trip, don't trip, don't drop the ball. And there was a time when it was like, when's this thing going to implode? Because it's going together awful well, and the film looks awfully good, and the story seems to hang together logically. So the toughest part was the fear that we'd been kidding ourselves. Turned out we hadn't been.